I think we would all agree that injuries suck, man. At one time, Derrick Rose was an explosive athlete with a relentless drive of attacking the basket, and he was the MVP. And now, we know what happened. I'll be honest, if I was running the New York Knicks, I would not bring Derrick Rose back. That being said, I do still think he can be a valuable player for an NBA team. Let's talk about Derrick Rose. This season for the Knicks, he put up 18 points a game while also shooting 47% from the field. So he can still be an efficient scorer. And I think, regardless of his athleticism decreases and whatever else that ails him at this point in his career, I do still think he has value when it comes to attacking the basket because he showed a lot of signs this season for the Knicks as a guy who, one, is still pretty damn fast when it comes to going in a straight line. He still has the ability to beat a guy off the dribble or go in the open floor or perhaps get a screen from someone and then go towards the rim. Definitely not what he once was, and we'll touch on that more as we go here, but still effective in that area none the least. And then when he actually gets into the restricted area and inside the paint, he can still finish well. He's around 54% at the basket, which, isn't beautiful, but given that he is a guard, it's not bad, definitely. And then he actually shoots a little above league average when it comes to inside the paint, but outside of the restricted area. So Rose always had an ability to have some wild hook shots, and he still has all that in his arsenal. So that's good. And as we go along on this video and we look at some of the things he's good at and not good at, I will say that I do think that his calling card of just simply attacking the basket is the one thing that's going to keep him going in the NBA. Sure, he may not be able to dunk on people's heads anymore, but he can still get there. And there is always value for someone who can just force the issue offensively and get into the paint. So Derrick has that going for him. We can talk about some other things that he does well, which is his mid-range jumper is not bad. He's shown a lot of confidence when it comes to rising up for a 15-footer or so, typically in the pick and roll, where someone will just give him a lot of space because they're willing to give him the jumper because they don't want him to attack inside. And he just pulls up, and it's actually been okay for him this year, shooting about 40% for a mid-range on the season, and given how many he attempts, I think that's okay. It would benefit him to improve on that a bit more, but I do think it's the start of something that he could develop. And then we can also talk about his playmaking. He does still get about 4 assists a game. He's nowhere near one of the better playmakers in the NBA, but if there is an obvious pass to be made to a guy who is open, he is still capable of making it. The days of him averaging nearly 8 assists in his MVP season for the Chicago Bulls, those days are done, but I do think he can still be at least a ball handler for you. And he also gets to the free throw line about twice a game, where he actually shoots around 87%, so there are definitely some good things still with Derrick. However, we're going to have to talk about the negatives here too. One, his explosion just isn't there as much anymore. So sometimes there was a seam that he was able to get through where he could beat his defender, or there was a slight opening. Now those close up a little bit faster for him now, and he's not able to just go right to the rim all the time. And while he is still pretty athletic, when you're not as good as you once were, it's just easier for guys to contest your shots around the rim. So even if he can still beat a guy off the dribble, you might see him get his shot blocked a bit more often, or he's just simply not as high up in the air as he used to be, which is just going to make it more difficult for you to finish. In 2011, Derrick shot 57% at the basket, and this year he's at 54%. Just simply not as good. We can also talk about the three-pointer. It's ugly, man. The guy has shot below 30% from three for multiple seasons in a row now. We're in 2017. Being able to shoot as a perimeter player is huge because you want to provide spacing for your teammates, but also, especially at the point guard spot, if you're in pick and rolls, you want the opposing team to actually respect you, or else they sag off of you. It makes them easier to defend the roll man. It's just not ideal. If Derrick could develop that three-point shot to a point where it's at least respectable, that would be huge. But as of right now, there are not many positive signs for that one. And also, I mentioned his passing a moment ago. I mean, the 4 assists, it's really not ideal for a point guard, really. I mean, a lot of times the Knicks offense just kind of sticks with him, if you will. There are definitely opportunities where a player will be open, whether it be on the perimeter or going to the basket, where Derrick just simply does not catch them. He does still have that shoot-first mentality, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think it needs to be readjusted a bit here. And I think an interesting thing is when Derrick Rose is on the bench, the Knicks' assist percentage goes up by 10%. And I don't want to blame Derrick for all the Knicks' misfortunes this season, because there are many reasons for it. But I do think it's not a good sign when a team just simply has more assists when the starting point guard is not in the game. I mean, I think this is one of those reasons why I really wouldn't want Derrick to be a starter for me, but I do think he could be effective off the bench. We can also talk about the defense. He's just simply not that good on that side of the floor. I don't think he's god-awful. I think at one time he was good enough, but I think if you ask him to play any sense of off-ball defense and come around screens and be forced to recognize that he has to help or that he has to switch, I think he's going to have a problem. I think one-on-one defense he can survive, but the majority of the good teams in the NBA don't run basic offenses where you're just asked to defend one-on-one all the time. And that's what's hurting Derrick at this moment. I mean, in today's NBA, if you're a point guard who's not killing it from 3, you're not that good of a defensive player, and you're not that great of a playmaker, I mean, you can see the situation that he's in. But even with all that, I do think Derrick Rose can still be a quality piece of a team, even if he's not going to be dunking on Isaiah Thomas's head all the time. Here's an example of a couple of guys just last season who I think were in a similar position. One of which is Evan Turner, and the other one is Jeremy Lin. Both of these guys were the primary ball handlers for their teams off the bench last season. Evan Turner, not a three-point shooter, predominantly shoots mid-range jumpers, but a guy who can be a quality distributor of the basketball, and Jeremy Lin is in a similar situation. Both of these guys had very good head coaches, Brad Stevens as well as Steve Clifford, and they were just given the ball in their hands against a lot of the time NBA second units, and they really thrived in those areas. I think Derrick Rose should look for a similar situation in this upcoming free agency. The thing is, I don't know what the perfect spot is. I think one that could be interesting is the Memphis Grizzlies, because the moment that Mike Conley comes out of the game, they're just looking for something at the point guard position. However, they are going to be dealing with Tony Allen as well as Zach Randolph's contracts, so I don't know how much salary cap they're really going to have. But a situation like that would be interesting. A team that's just looking for some scoring when their 2 prime guys are not in the game. I think that sort of situation could be good for Derrick. However, like I mentioned, I don't know if the Grizzlies would actually be able to afford the guy. Another team that interested me was the Washington Wizards, because they just signed Brandon Jennings, hoping that he can provide some support at the backup point guard position for them. And they already run a lot of pick and rolls with John Wall anyway. However, they're not going to have much space either, because they're going to have to re-sign Otto Porter this offseason. Another team, the Utah Jazz, they've been looking for some help on the backup perimeter spots. But with George Hill and Gordon Hayward's free agency coming up, the money just simply isn't there. Another team I thought about was the Indiana Pacers to back up Jeff Teague, but then I realized their head coach is Nate McMillan, and I highly doubt that he would be able to implement a player like Derrick Rose into that sort of an offense. You know who I do think could make it work, though? Rick Carlisle of the Dallas Mavericks. And this one's interesting because they have Yogi there at the moment. Maybe Derrick could just be a backup, or if they draft a point guard this season, Derrick could be that veteran option at the position. I mean, Carlisle got the best years that Monte Ellis has ever had, so Maybe he could do a similar thing with Derrick Rose. Who knows? I do think Derrick would benefit greatly from developing the three-point shot. Derrick Rose can still be a valuable player in the NBA. I just think it has to be in a certain situation, probably coming off the bench. The team embraces what he does well, put him in a lot of pick and rolls, and hopefully it can work out.